Welcome back to the Halcyon Radio Podcast. My name is Elsie, and I will be your guide to the small town of Halcyon. In the last episode, I was recalling a fearful night in the city when a strange knock came to my door at the inn. When I opened it, all I found was a small box sprinkled with glitter. Let's continue the story. I was in the kitchen, studying the recipe card that had been in the small mysterious box I'd received 2 weeks ago. Today was the day of the Harvest Festival, and this was the last time before the big day I would make this pie. The recipe was for apple pumpkin pie, something I'd never had before or even heard of, but the few times I was successful at making it, it turned out wonderful. I chopped up the cold butter and mixed it with flour and water. I even added a dash of vanilla and cinnamon to give it that extra flavor. I sliced the apples as finely as I could and mixed them with a buttery cinnamon concoction. I pulled a pumpkin, cut in half, out of the oven. It smelled earthy and sweet. I scooped out the yellow-orange flesh while it was still steaming, mixing it with sugar and spices until it became creamy. I smoothed the dough out flat as Basil watched from the corner. "Make sure it's evenly flat, Elsie," he said, kindly, knowing he was rooting for me to win the pie contest. "Hey, don't bend the rules, Basil. No AI help, okay?" Basil made a small beeping noise, which I'd come to realize was a sign of discontent as he walked out of the kitchen. I carefully put the flat dough into a pie pan, then layered the thin apples with the pumpkin puree mixture until it was near the top. I smoothed out another flat piece of dough to lay on top. I trimmed the edges and pinched them. Then, with the leftover dough, with as much skill as I'd gained, I cut out small leaves and flowers and arranged them on top of the pie in a design. As I stood back to look at my work, I couldn't help but feel giddy. This pie that I'd made every day for 2 weeks, sometimes even 2 pies in a day just to get it right. And here I was at the finish line, hoping this was the best one yet. With care, I measured everything out just as the recipe card said, pushing away the feeling of unease about not knowing who the card came from or how it had gotten to my door. Janice walked in to look at the pie before I put it in the oven. "Oh, this one looks like a winner, Elsie," she said with a twinkle in her eye. I slipped it into the oven and set the timer, knowing that even a 2-minute difference made a big impact. Then Janice and I started on our sweet potato casserole for the harvest feast. It was an old recipe from Janice's grandmother. Basil came in because he wanted to feel helpful. "What would you like me to start on, Janice?" he asked. She handed him a bowl full of sweet potatoes to chop. Then Darla walked in. Confused, I asked her what she was up to. "I'm off of school for the day. Everyone knows that," she said, then continued. "I'm trying to make these flatbreads, but my mom is using my kitchen. I'm hoping you or Basil could help me." Basil was incredibly efficient at chopping and already done with the sweet potatoes, so he went over to the stove with her to fry the dough on a cast iron skillet. I looked at the timer for the pie. 4 minutes left. I was starting to smell the sweetness of the apples and pumpkin dancing together in the air. Then I saw Basil go into the pantry, just grabbing some seasoning, he explained. I was tending to the casserole when I heard from behind me Darla saying, I don't think... Then Basil rushed over to the stove. "Minor problem." Then I could smell the smoke. "Okay, semi-major, possibly major emergency." As I looked behind me, I could see flames. An oil fire had started. Darla must have added more oil than needed when Basil had gone to the pantry. The flames were tall. There was screaming from both Darla and myself. Janice and Basil ran to the pantry to get a fire blanket while I turned off the heat. Then I heard a ringing noise, but I assumed it was the fire alarm. Basil came rushing over with the fire blanket and threw it on the flames. They died immediately. We were all out of breath over the whole thing. We all helped clean up the mess, and Darla decided she would make a fruit salad instead and went on her way to the farmer's market to grab anything left over. That's when I noticed. The timer from my pie had already gone off during the commotion. The delicate smells of the pie were covered by the smoke. As I pulled the pie out of the oven, I could see the crust was darker than I wanted it to be, but it wasn't ruined. I leaned over to smell that the crust was overdone, but only by a fraction. I knew this would cost me points at the contest, but I was still hopeful. Janice and I finished the sweet potato casserole, making sure to top it with homemade marshmallows. We cleaned the kitchen and I made my way upstairs to get changed. While I was cooking, I'd noticed someone had left a beautiful burnt orange long-sleeve dress on my bed with a note from Mrs. Maisie saying she couldn't wait to see me in it. She'd even left matching boots to go with it. The thought alone was touching. As I slipped on the dress, I noticed little floral details in the stitching. It was beautifully made. Janice and I grabbed our baked goods and wandered down Main Street to the Harvest Festival, located near the farms at the end of town. The greenhouses acted as a warm haven if you needed it. The sun was out even though it was chilly. The Harvest Festival unfurled across the town square with lantern strings and the smell of cinnamon drifting between them like an invitation. Vendors set out their autumn wares, jars of honey glowing like liquid gold, bundles of wheat tied in rust-colored ribbons, warm loaves of bread whose crusts crackled softly in the cool air. Children darted between the booths with caramel apples sticking to their fingertips, their laughter mingling with the soft plucking of a banjo from the makeshift stage. The air was cool enough for scarves, but warm enough to keep cheeks flushed instead of chilled, and the townsfolk wandered with mugs of milled cider, each sip steaming. Near the center of the square, long tables had been dressed in gingham cloth and lined with pies on wire racks. Blueberry, apple crumble, pecan, and a spiced pumpkin custard that drew a crowd all on its own. The judges wandered between them with clipboards while the bakers pretended not to hover too closely. Above it all was the steady hum of community, the easy way neighbors leaned into each other's stories, the way old friends greeted each other with lingering hugs, the way newcomers were folded into the evening as naturally as falling leaves caught in a passing breeze. It was the kind of day where the air was full of warmth and unspoken gratitude, the kind where even the stars seemed to gather a little closer to watch, a time where the world felt small, safe, and lit from within. I set my pie down with the rest of the ones being judged. There were so many I had no idea how mine would even stand out. As the pie contest was starting, I grabbed a plate and piled it high with turkey, mashed potatoes, gravy, Janice's sweet potato casserole, and I even took a few of the cinnamon cookies. As I sat down at one of the long tables, I saw Charlie with the same woman he'd been with at the Halloween party. He looked happy as he clinked mugs together with a group around them. I looked around for Darla and Janice but couldn't find them, so I sat at the end of a table with a group of teenagers around me. They spoke in a language I didn't understand, certainly not up to date with all the trends and lingo. I kept to myself and ate, every bite better than the last. Then Mr. Peabody, a city council member, went onto a makeshift stage made of cinder blocks and wooden pallets and announced they found a winner of the pie contest. I had to admit I was excited. My heart began to pound at the thought of winning, and then the thought of being in front of everyone stung with fear. Mr. Peabody began, "Okay, folks, there were a lot of good pies this year, but we found our winners. Our honorable mention this year comes from our newest member in town, Elsie of the Inn." I could hear cheers and applause. "Elsie, come on down." I stood up, now shaking, as I tried to keep my composure. I stood in front of the town of smiling faces. In third place, Charlie. Charlie, come on down. I watched as Charlie stood up and bowed to the audience, then made his way up next to me. I didn't notice before how tall he was until he was standing right beside me. His grin was wide, but I knew he wasn't happy, because this probably meant Mrs. Mayweather was going to win. But to my surprise, Mr. Peabody started again. In second place, Mrs. Mayweather. But this time, there wasn't clapping or cheering. There was an audience of gasps and even a couple people booing. I watched as the little woman made her way to the front with Charlie and me. Her face looked sour. I could hear her speaking to Charlie. "Oh, I would love to see who won this year," she said while rolling her eyes. Mr. Peabody started again. "And our winner of this year's pie contest is..." His pause caused everyone to lean in to hear who could have possibly beaten Mrs. Mayweather this year. "It's Jed of Cole's Farm. Come on down, Jed." There were groans and boos from every direction. I leaned over to Charlie to ask, "So who's this guy?" Charlie responded, "Oh, he just finished high school last year. Started working on his dad's farm. He's lived here his whole life. He's gotten into some mischief here and there, but deep down, he's a good kid. Have no idea how he won, though." I could see the disbelief on Mrs. Mayweather's face as she said, "Now stop right now. How did he win?" She began to quiz Jed on how to make the crust and what seasonings he used, then started grilling him. "So Jed, I know you've got that new robot working on the farm. He didn't happen to give you any pointers, did he?" Jed looked nervous. "I baked the pie myself, Mrs. Mayweather. I didn't do any cheating." Mrs. Mayweather began again. "But did he give you any advice? Did he help you with creating the recipe?" She was really hoping to get to the bottom of this. Jed, wringing his hands, said, "Well, the robot just suggested I use cream of tartar. I didn't even know what that was. And he told me the temp I was using was too high, but that's it." Jed stepped back from Mrs. Mayweather. "Ah, I knew it. Mr. Peabody, did you hear this? He used AI to bake the pie. He should be taken out of the contest." Mr. Peabody, now in a complicated position, stammered, Well, Jed spoke up. He didn't help with anything. I baked it myself, stirred in all the ingredients myself." They kept going back and forth until Mr. Peabody became overwhelmed and left the stage. Charlie turned to me. Doesn't matter much now." He shrugged his shoulders and went back to the table. Mrs. Mayweather tried to get my opinion, but I stammered as well, not knowing how to respond. That's when Darla came from the crowd, and just like a child would, not noticing the chaos around her. "Elsie, let's go to the forest again. Let's go. You ate, right? The festival is basically over now." The sun was just starting to set, making the field glow in amber lighting. I looked at the trees, not seeing the lights since the night we'd gone into the forest. "I don't think so, Darla," I said. Darla scrunched up her nose. "Fine, I'll go myself." In between the yelling of the crowd, I saw Darla run towards the trees. I ran after her, and then, before I could catch her, she ran into the forest. Thank you for listening to the Halcyon Radio podcast. Please join me for the next episode coming soon.